Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of Coffee and Issues. I'm joined with my co-host here, Michael Lejeune. Hey, Michael, how you doing today?
Doing good, Carroll, man. How are you?
All right, I'm doing great. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, I think the topic we're going to cover is going to help people a lot to figure out how to get some clarity around their first steps in the market.
Absolutely. So if you didn't watch episode 1, I would recommend that you go back and watch episode 1 because we talked about the format of all of these episodes that we're doing. And ideally, what we want to do here is basically to line all of our episodes up in a sequential order, issues that government contractors are going to face as they go along their journey from getting started all the way to the end. So I'm guessing because there's a lot of issues in the government marketplace, we're going to probably have a lot of episodes to talk about.
Going to be going on for a long time.
Right. Today, we're going to talk about the issue of clarity. And this is like a pre-launch issue, I would say, in terms of getting started, because I've worked with hundreds of businesses directly over my career. And I see a lot of folks don't have really clarity around a lot of areas. And there's clarity issues as it relates to, hey, are you clear on who your market is? And that is a discussion that we're probably going to be having in the next episode as we start talking about market research. But even before you begin, I think it's important to have clarity around what your ultimate destination is. And I like Stephen Covey, his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Mm-hmm. I like what he says when he says, begin with the end in mind. And I also think about my Navy days that's like, hey, if we're going on a trip, if we're going on a destination, we know where we're going. And I believe the reason why that's important for anybody, any business, as it relates to government contracting is because government contracting becomes kind of like a sustainable fuel source to help you fuel your journey is the way that I look at it. How do you look at that issue, Mike, in terms of just getting clear on ultimately where you want to go in business and just getting clear on the general nature of things pre-launch before you even make that first step into the government marketplace?
Yeah, I think it's super important because when you lack clarity, you often lack direction. And so you just kind of flounder around in your business. And so once you have clarity on the issues we're going to talk about today, it really allows you to use those decision points as a filter for future decisions that you're going to make. So do I go left? Do I go right? Do I focus here or there? Whatever it is, when you have clarity around all these little points, it just helps point you in the right direction. And well, I don't know about you, but for a lot of people that I've talked to, again, talked to hundreds, if not thousands of business owners in the government market, this is often the first business they have ever personally owned. And I have yet to meet a business owner in my life that actually has training on how to be a business owner. Most of them have training in their niche. So if I'm cybersecurity or a plumber or whatever, I've got all kind of training on how to do cybersecurity, on how to be a plumber, on how to provide whatever product or service. I have little, if any, training on how to be a business owner. And so most people dive in, no clarity, and they just start swimming, right? And as they're doing that, they realize at some point they come up for air and realize, I feel like I'm drowning because I don't know where I'm going. And you don't know where you're going because you don't have the training. You haven't thought through these processes. And to take a step back now almost feels a little like failure for some folks, but it really is refreshing regardless of where you are in that stage, whether you're in the beginning or whether you're 20 years in the business, to take a step back and make sure you know, well, where am I going? Why am I going there? What are the things I want to accomplish? I know one of the questions you threw out there this morning was, what's my exit strategy? Things like that. People don't think about that. And then you just wake up one day and you make a hasty decision. So I think a lot of this will help people avoid a lot of the problems and headaches by just kind of thinking through some of this stuff. Again, regardless of what stage you're at.
Absolutely. And talking about that exit strategy, I know there's probably a lot of people getting started be like, exit strategy, I don't even have an entry strategy yet. That's important too. But a note on the exit strategy, and every client that I have coached, well, not every client, but I had started doing this in the past couple of years, is I ask, what is your exit strategy? Is it to sell your business? Maybe you want to basically just retire someday, but you want to put all the people in all the right places so that the business continues to be a financial asset to you. Other exit strategies include dying, which is not a good one. I think about this. It's like, especially for the business owners whose families really rely upon their business to sustain them. And you've got this one person that's so pivotal to the business. I really believe that everybody should be thinking about this. And then in the context of government contracting, how does this come into play and what is your why? Why are you getting involved with government contracting? And I think for a lot of businesses, that why is different. But I think that when it boils down to it, growth is one thing, but diversification is another one. And as we talked about, government market opportunities becomes kind of that sustainable fuel source. And I've seen it so many times when we've had bad economies or bad recessions where the economy was contracting, but the government was still spending money. And here we go again. It looks different this time around than it did back in 2010 timeframe, but the government's getting ready to set another stimulus spending bill in play that's going to put a lot of money on top of that $500 to $600 billion of spend every year inside of the government marketplace. What are you seeing on this, Mike, just in terms of that topic and just what people should be thinking about it as the why? Because I think sometimes people get involved for sometimes the wrong reasons.
Yeah. And the number one reason that people get in the government that I come across, it's not the only one, but it's probably the biggest reason that I see is someone they know said, hey, you should sell to the government. And that's literally why. And there's a lot of folks that are saying, okay, well, I've been in the commercial market. We're doing well, but I've heard if I get into government, it's stable. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of profit. And so when I'm often talking to people, I will ask a lot of questions around why they're trying to enter the market. Why now is a question we ask a lot. And depending on the answer, I will often say, I wouldn't do this if I were you.
Right.
If you are crushing it in the commercial industry and things are going really well, why do you want to do this? This may not be the right decision for you, but it's one of those things that it looks really attractive, but your business is already going really well. So why add this to the mix if you don't understand it? Or, hey, if we're going to jump in, let's set the expectations. In the commercial market, your turnaround from prospect to sale is 2 weeks. It's not going to happen in the government market for the most part, depending on what you sell. And so they start to chase it because somebody said it was a good idea, whether they wanted to or not. And now they're kind of pursuing this thing called government contracting. And then a lot of people just don't know anything about it. So I really caution the why are you getting into it to make sure that those reasons are good, valid reasons. And not only are you approaching the market with eyes wide open, but you've really got these expectations that are accurate. Because again, there's so much misinformation around, well, hey, I'm a service disabled non-veteran, I'm a woman, I can qualify for 8A or one of these things. Money's just going to rain down from the heavens. And it's just not true. And so if we can help set their expectations, I think that helps a lot on the entry point. But again, that goes back into, so why are you getting in this? Oh, because I'm a service disabled woman owned hub zone, whatever. And I think it'll be an easy market. Okay, let's back up for a minute. I would say that those are probably the top reasons I see why people got in. The other reasons that I see are people that have been in government or been in, I call it the military side of it. I know that's all government, but they've been in the military, they've been in government, they've grown to really love the industry, and now they want to go do it on their own. And those are people that often have a lot of information about the market. They kind of have an idea of how it works and what's going on. And it's just a love for the market, a love for the mission and those kind of things. And that really helps tie into their personal why. Like, hey, I'm on the planet to help solve this problem. And if I go down this rabbit hole here, this is going to help me on a personal level, on a business level, professional level. It helps them come out of the gate with, again, just a little more clarity on how they're approaching the market.
Absolutely. You already put an answer to a question that I was going to ask you, which was because you got to make a go or no go decision. And that's part of the reason why clarity comes into that perspective when you kind of say, okay, here's where I want to go with my business. Here's where I'm going. Why do I want to do government contracting, but why should I not go? And that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, what are some of the reasons why somebody should not go? And I think you've given one of the answers already, which I see a lot of people enter through this channel and through this why, which is, well, because I'm a woman-owned business, I'm a veteran-owned business, I'm a minority-owned business. I think that that's the wrong reason why. And I've seen a lot of people go through like that, or I've seen a business that's out there that is going to try to set up a whole different entity. Maybe they're just a regular small business, but they say, hey, we don't really have many advantages in this marketplace. So we're going to put 51% in my wife's name, and we're going to go as a woman-owned business, or we're going to create this separate entity, put my wife in charge or a veteran in charge. That, I think, is the recipe for disaster. I've seen it a lot of times. And if you're just getting started and you're thinking about doing that, I really have you really reconsider, because a certification is not really a value to the government. Yes, they like to award to those various entities that are out there, the small businesses, the woman-owned, service-disabled vet, HubZone, 8A companies. Small disadvantaged businesses are getting a lot of attention right now because the current administration has a goal to increase utilization and contracting to small disadvantaged businesses by 50%. But in essence, there's also a lot of competitors who have all of those certifications who are already out there. So if really you're going in with that expectation that, like, hey, because I'm a service disabled veteran, government has to set contracts aside for me. So once I get in, I shouldn't have a problem. You really got to go back to the core foundation of what you do and still have a core value that you bring, because you will have good competitors that you're going to meet that have those certifications that's already going to be positioned. So you got to also think beyond that and really go back to what is the problem or the solution that you're going to solve for the government above and beyond what they're currently already doing.
Yeah, I think one of the worst decisions, or one of the worst reasons to make this decision, is I have the status, like you said. And people don't realize there are thousands and thousands of companies. Almost every single one of our clients has at least one, if not multiple statuses. All of them. Off the top of my head, I cannot name a single client that doesn't at least qualify for the small business status. And so it's just the way it is. So most of them have something. And so I'd say that's a really bad reason to pursue it. Another one is if you don't have the time. Number one, it's not a, hey, we're going to do this like a weekend real estate, right? You can't be weekend government contracting like that. So if you don't have the time to dedicate to it, and if you don't have the time to win your first contract, a lot of people get in and think, well, I just get on the website and I start bidding and I'll win some stuff. Probably not. It may take you anywhere from 6 to 12 months to win your first contract. Do you have that kind of time? If you don't have that kind of time to put forth the energy and make a go of this, then maybe right now is not the right time. And sometimes that's what I tell people. I'm not telling you no. What I'm telling you is maybe right now is not a good time. Yo, you just had a baby. You just quit your job and started the business. The business is going well and you're in the commercial space, rocking and rolling. Maybe right now is not the time to add something new to your plate, right?
Yeah.
You know, go get a dog if you want to add something new to your plate. Don't go and add a whole new business line in here that you know nothing about, because then you don't have the time to dedicate to it, and it's not going to go anywhere if you don't have the time to dedicate to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for those of you guys who are here that you may be already a contractor and been out there for a couple of years, you might think, hey, this is not relevant to me, but I really think it's relevant to everybody, because I work with contractors who's been out there for years who really, they're doing good and they're getting some contracts, but then they're having issues because if a key person leaves their team, they wanting to retire here in a couple of years, but they have no plan around how to do that. So the other clarity point and the benefit of deciding now, like what your exit plan is that you'll have better direction on where you want to go and what you've got to do, but you're also going to get some benefit in knowing what not to do. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, you heard about the shiny object syndrome, and all of these things come into play and you're like, ooh, I want to grab that. I want to grab that. And I know for myself personally, having clarity in my own business, and I didn't start out that way, but over the years, I started doing these exercises where I put myself in terms of that begin with the end in mind strategy. Right. And when I think about that, it really helps me say, I don't think that I want to do that right now.
Yeah, I mean, the more clarity you have, the better filter you have. You can filter out the shiny objects when you have more clarity. And I'll tell you, here is what I see a lot of. So I do consultations with people every single week, and I would bet somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 600 companies go through my calendar every single year. 500 to 600 companies. And over the last 10 years, I have probably only talked to, I would say, less than 5 in the last 10 years that I said, so what's your plan? And boom, they email me a plan. And it's a plan. Yeah. It's got goals. It's got milestones. It's got all these things in it. So think about that. 500 to 600 companies a year over the last just 10 years. I could go back further and still get the same number. But over the last 10 years, so it's like 6,000 companies. And I can name 5 that actually had a plan that said, hey, we want to build this type of company. We eventually want to sell it this way. We eventually want our employees to own it. We eventually want to get to here. Here's our next milestone in revenue. Here are our goals for this year and all this stuff. And when I sit down with those companies, they would say, yeah, at least once a year, we sit down and we build out our plan. 5 companies out of like 6,000. And so most people, what does that tell you? Most people lack the clarity at even a quarterly or annual basis of where are we going? Mm-hmm. What are we trying to do? So when I think about clarity, long-term end in mind, where are we going? What are our goals? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to have my son-in-law take this over because he's also SDVOSB? Am I going to, turn it over to the employees? What are we going to do? And then breaking it down based on those milestones of revenue, which is super important. Nobody ever wants to talk about that stuff. They're like, I want more revenue. Well, how do you quantify more revenue? $1 more is more revenue. Right. No, that's not what you wanted. So get the clarity on how much revenue, how do we increase the revenue, the strategies we're going to use. That gets into some other things, but at the beginning of all of this, we're talking about clarity. And if you don't have that level of clarity in what you're doing, again, you're going to start swimming in this business and you're going to feel like you're drowning because you're out there going, well, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what my goals are. I don't know who my target audience is. I don't know how to sell my product. I don't know what my product is. Maybe I've got 6 products on the shelf and only one of them is good for the government. I don't know because I haven't really thought through it. And so the planning aspect of it is so big and it's very, very neglected by everybody. So you can shift the odds in your favor just by sitting down and saying, where do we want to go? How much money do we want to make? What's our plan for the next 6, 12 months? And you will totally change the game for yourself.
Absolutely, man. Those are great points. So I want to leave off with a couple of action items. And this is what I want to do at the end of every one of our episodes. Give an action item. I'll give like a one thing action item, and I'll ask Michael to give a one thing action item that you guys can take away from here so that it's not just like we're listening to something here and good concepts, right? So let's go ahead and put an action item out there. My action item is what I would suggest in terms of the clarity is just to sit down, take 5-10 minutes to think about really what you want your business to look like 5 years, 10 years down the road, and write that down. And then from there, you'll be able to start to better see where you want to go, get your exit strategy there. You hear about it all the time, an exit plan. Put that down. And what that plan might look like in 5 years, you're going to change maybe every year, but maybe it'll be the same because you always have to come back and do that check-in. It's like a clarity check-in. Okay, is that still really where I want to go? Is this still really where I want to go? And then like maybe the 4th year, like that's not really where I want to go. So maybe you shift, but at least you've got a direction on where you're going. And I believe the most important thing inside of this is it's going to sustain you, because if you have the why connected to that end destination that puts you in the government marketplace, and you know that the government marketplace is going to sustain you to get to that end goal, I believe that when it's going to get tough, which it will, and when you start getting frustrated, which you will, you're going to remember why you're doing this. It's to get you to a certain place. Is because the government's going to help to accelerate you once you get this thing figured out, and it's going to create a sustainable source of fuel for you. Mike, do you got a one thing action item that they can
Yeah.
take away and go out
Yeah.
and implement that's going to help them with their clarity today?
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say what you just told them is so important. And it's easy to say, it's not, I don't need to do that. It's very important for you to do it, because when you take and put the pen to paper and do what Carroll just said, it makes it real. It goes from in your imagination to this real thing. And it really does help a lot of folks just to take that simple step. So I want to say my action item is to do your action item, but I won't do
All
that.
right, awesome.
I won't piggyback on it though.
Yeah.
And say the other thing to do is to find out if there's a market for what you sell.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that. You either go look in sam.gov or you go look in usaspending.gov. That's a great way to do it. And go look at the data. Be sure that there's a market for what you sell. And the reason I bring that up is a lot of times people will come to me and they have this really obscure product or service. And I'm like, the government will buy it. This is an uphill battle. Are you ready for the uphill battle? Mm-hmm. And then sometimes they're geographically restricted. They're like, hey, I can sell this, but I can only sell it in Texas or Arkansas. And so if you go look at who's buying what you sell and put your restrictions around it to make sure that, hey, there's enough volume out there that you can do the business. And I think that'll help a lot of people, because the worst thing you can do is sit down, you do Carroll's step, you start doing some planning, you start going after it, and then you've not looked at the data and realized that the government doesn't buy what you sell, and you've invested a lot of time. So do Carroll's step, then sit down, make sure the government buys what you sell. And it meets your criteria, whether it's geographic or whatever criteria that you have, because we want to make sure there's a market who's going to buy what you sell. We'll figure out who those individuals are and how to target them and all that in future episodes. Right now, we just want to know, do they buy what you sell? That's it.
And I know we're going to be talking some more about that in episode 2, as like you start to get started in this government marketplace, and being like the first step is this to determine just what Michael was talking about. And before we leave today, Michael, I want to do like a one myth busting thing, because I think that there's a lot of perception out there on both sides. Sometimes people will think that like, well, it's just this government marketplace is just really too big for me, or there's no opportunity there, or it's not profitable. Well, that's probably 3 myths. I said one myth busting. But the point that I wanted to make here is that don't just look at being the prime. There's also subcontracting opportunities that you can get involved with inside of the government marketplace. And as we go into future episodes, we'll talk more about this fit. Where do you fit? Some people jump in and they're like, I want that $1 million contract. But guess what? You can make a good business off of $10,000 independent small opportunities across the board, which oftentimes turn into bigger opportunities once that person on the other side of the buying transaction knows you, likes you, and trusts you. And so I know that a lot of the experts in GovCon also recommend starting small, and there's a lot of small opportunities that are out there that's bite-sized for small, even micro enterprise businesses, that are out there. So
stuff they'll put on a credit card. Here's what I would say to that one. There's a place for everybody. There's a place for everybody. I don't care how big, how small your company is. There's a place for everybody. You just need to do a little bit of the research, a little bit of the homework, and then have laser focus in this, and you can win a contract. Anybody can do it. I can do it. Anybody can do it. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I think that we covered that topic pretty well, and I think we can go ahead and wrap up this episode. So do you have any parting words before we close?
One thing that I'll say is just take this in bite sizes. Mm-hmm. If you just take it in bite sizes, one episode at a time, the little action items, you will be impressed with yourself if you just implement these little bitty things. One thing a week really adds up over the course of time. And so just take it in bite sizes.
And I'll piggyback off of that, Mike, and I'll say bite-sized and one step at a time, but make your steps consistent. Because what I see a lot of times too is folks want to do government contracting, but then they get sidetracked with everything else. Government contracting is like a nice thing, right? That's again why clarity in your why and why you need to stay consistent, just like working out, right? We're not consistently working out. It'll take us forever to get to where we want to go. So consistent action. And I think that those 3 things, bite size, one step at a time in consistent action, but continuously moving forward is going to get you there. And with that, I think that we're going to close up for today. And I would like to invite everybody to join us for episode 2, where we're going to be talking more about this whole getting started phase. We're going to be talking about market research. Again, if you're even a seasoned contractor, I highly recommend that you stick with us through all the episodes, because I worked with a lot of seasoned contractors who's essentially like went to step 10, and there's a lot of things that they left on the table in steps 1 through 10.
We talk with billion-dollar companies all the time that aren't doing most of the fundamental things you should be doing. So everybody needs to go back to the basics sometimes. And there's so many little tips and tricks in all the basics. So
we're going to go ahead and close today. And so again, I thank you for joining us. If you want to join us next time, remember the URL is gavology.com/issues. That's where you can find all of our episodes. You can also submit an issue for future sessions, and you can also register to be live with us for our post-session Q&A. So with that, we'll go ahead and say goodbye, and thank you for joining us.